upon a time, in a land far, far away, there was a forest called Willowbrook Forest. It was the kind of forest that seemed to exist only in dreams. The trees grew so tall that their branches seemed to touch the clouds. The leaves were green in summer, golden in autumn, and covered in soft white snow in winter. And between the trees, little rivers flowed gently over smooth round stones, making soft sounds like a lullaby. In this forest, the sun rose slowly each morning, painting the sky in gentle shades of pink and orange and gold. And each evening the sun would set just as slowly, turning the sky into a blanket of purple and deep blue before the stars came out, one by one, like tiny silver lights hung by invisible hands. The air in Willowbrook Forest always smelled sweet. In spring, it smelled like fresh flowers and new leaves. In summer, it smelled like warm sunshine and wild berries. In autumn, it smelled like fallen leaves and ripe apples. And in winter, it smelled like cold, clean snow and pine needles. If you stood very still in the middle of Willowbrook Forest, you could hear many gentle sounds. You could hear the birds singing their morning songs. You could hear the leaves whispering to each other when the wind passed through them. You could hear the rivers babbling over their stones. You could hear the crickets chirping on warm summer nights. And you could hear the soft, quiet sounds of the forest breathing, slowly, peacefully, as it had done for hundreds and hundreds of years. In the heart of this forest there was a small village. Not a village of people, you understand. No, this was a village of animals. Small animals with soft fur and bright eyes, who lived together peacefully, helping each other, sharing with each other, and taking care of their little corner of the world. The houses in this village were made from fallen branches and soft moss and smooth bark. Some were built into the hollows of great old trees. Some were nestled between the roots of giant oaks. And some were little cottages made of twigs and leaves, with tiny chimneys that released thin trails of wood smoke on cold evenings. In this village, everyone had a job to do. Everyone helped. Everyone contributed. Everyone, that is, except for one. But we will get to him soon enough. First, let me tell you about the forest itself, because the forest was special. The forest was like a great, gentle grandmother, watching over all the creatures who lived within it. It provided food for those who worked for it. It provided shelter for those who prepared for it. And it provided warmth for those who respected it. The animals of Willowbrook Forest knew this. They understood that the forest was generous, but that generosity had to be earned. You could not simply take from the forest without giving something back. You could not simply enjoy the gifts of summer without preparing for the long, cold months of winter. This was the way of things. This was how the forest worked. and all the animals understood this. All except one. Let me tell you about the animals who lived in Willowbrook Forest. They were very fine creatures, each one. There was Bramble the rabbit. Bramble was a large, gentle rabbit with soft brown fur and long ears that twitched when she was thinking. She had warm, kind eyes the colour of honey, and she always wore a little apron made from woven grass, because Bramble was always cooking or baking, or preserving fruits and vegetables for the winter. Bramble lived in a cosy burrow beneath an old oak tree. Her burrow was warm and clean, with soft beds made of dried grass, and shelves lined with jars of jam and pickled vegetables. In autumn, Bramble would work from sunrise to sunset, gathering carrots and turnips and cabbages from her little garden. She would dry herbs and nuts. She would make apple butter and berry preserves. She would prepare everything she needed for the long winter months, and Bramble was happy. She was happy because she knew that when the snow came and the wind blew cold, she would be warm and fed and comfortable in her little burrow. She had earned her comfort through hard work and careful planning. There was also Sooty the squirrel. Sooty was a small, quick squirrel with dark brown fur and a very fluffy tail that he was quite proud of. He had bright, intelligent eyes that missed nothing, and he was always busy, always moving, always working. Sooty lived high up in a great pine tree, in a nest made of twigs and moss and soft feathers. In autumn, Sooty would run back and forth across the forest floor, collecting acorns and hazelnuts and walnuts. He would carry them one by one up to his nest, where he had hollowed out special storage rooms in the trunk of the tree. By the time winter came, Sooty would have hundreds and hundreds of nuts stored away, enough to last him through the coldest, longest nights. Sooty was diligent and careful. He knew that one acorn could mean the difference between a comfortable winter and a hungry one. So he worked hard, and he wasted nothing. There was also Barnaby the bear. Barnaby was the largest animal in the village, with thick brown fur and kind, gentle eyes. Despite his size, Barnaby was soft-spoken and thoughtful. He lived in a cave at the edge of the forest, and he spent his autumn gathering honey and berries and preparing his cave for winter. Barnaby would line his cave with soft moss and dried leaves, making a warm, comfortable bed. He would collect wild honey from the beehives at the edge of the meadow, storing it in hollow logs. He would gather berries and dry them in the sun. And he would make sure that his cave was sealed against the cold wind, with a heavy curtain of woven branches to cover the entrance. Barnaby worked slowly and steadily, because he knew that winter waited for no one. The days grew shorter, the nights grew longer, and soon the snow would come. And when it did, Barnaby wanted to be ready. There was also Wren the mouse. Wren was the smallest animal in the village, with soft grey fur and tiny black eyes that sparkled like beads. She lived in a small house made from a hollowed-out pumpkin, and she was perhaps the most hard-working of all the animals. Every day, from sunrise to sunset, Wren would search for seeds and grains and tiny berries. She would carry them back to her little pumpkin house, storing them in small rooms carved into the walls. She would spin thread from plant fibers and weave little blankets for her bed. She would collect soft feathers for her pillow, and she would make sure that every corner of her home was warm and comfortable and ready for winter. Wren was small, but her heart was large, and her work ethic was admirable. There was also Hazel the deer. Hazel was tall and graceful, with soft brown fur and gentle brown eyes. She lived in a sheltered grove at the edge of the meadow, and she spent her autumn gathering dried grasses and leaves for her winter bedding. She would find the best places to shelter from the wind. She would memorize where the evergreen trees grew thick, so she could hide from the worst of the snowstorms. Hazel was quiet and thoughtful, and she worked alone, steadily, patiently, preparing for the cold months ahead. And there were others too. There was Oliver the owl, who slept during the day but watched over the forest at night, making sure all was well. There was Pip the robin, who would sing cheerful songs to encourage the others as they worked. There was Clementine the fox, who, despite being clever, also worked hard to prepare for winter, gathering food and making her den warm and comfortable. All the animals of Willowbrook Forest understood the rhythm of the seasons. They knew that summer was a time of abundance, but that abundance would not last forever. They knew that winter was a time of rest, but that rest could only come if they worked hard during the warmer months. This was the way of things. This was how life in the forest had always been, and everyone understood this. Everyone, that is, except for Rocky. He was a handsome raccoon, if he did say so himself. He had soft grey fur that was thick and glossy, a little black mask around his bright amber eyes, and a magnificent bushy tail with alternating rings of grey and black. His paws were clever and nimble, and his smile was wide and charming. Rocky lived in a large hollow tree near the centre of the village. His home was not as neat or as well prepared as the homes of the other animals, but Rocky didn't seem to mind. There were piles of old leaves on the floor, half-eaten berries scattered about, and not a single jar of preserved food on any shelf. But Rocky didn't worry about such things. Rocky never worried about anything. You see, Rocky was very clever. He was perhaps the cleverest animal in the whole forest. He could solve problems quickly, find creative solutions to difficult situations, and talk his way out of almost any trouble. And because Rocky was so clever, he believed he didn't need to work. "Why work so hard?" Rocky would say, stretching out under a warm patch of sunlight. The forest will provide, it always does. And so, while the other animals worked, Rocky rested. While Bramble tended her garden, Rocky lay under a tree, watching the clouds drift by. While Sooty collected acorns, Rocky played in the leaves, kicking them up into the air and laughing as they fell back down. While Barnaby gathered honey, Rocky splashed in the river, trying to catch fish with his bare paws, more often than not getting wet and laughing about it. While Wren spun thread and wove blankets, Rocky sang songs to himself, sitting on a branch and swinging his legs happily. Rocky always found shortcuts. When there was work to be done, he would find a way to avoid it. When the other animals asked for help, Rocky would smile his charming smile and say, "I'll do it later," or "I'm too tired right now," or "someone else will take care of it." At first, the other animals didn't mind too much. Rocky was funny. Rocky was entertaining. Rocky could make anyone laugh with his jokes and his stories and his silly antics. So they let him be. They let him rest while they worked. They let him play while they prepared. After all, Rocky was their friend. And friends helped each other, or so they thought. But as the days passed, and Rocky continued to avoid work, the other animals began to feel differently. Bramble would sigh quietly when she saw Rocky lounging in the sun while she carried heavy baskets of vegetables. Sooty would frown when Rocky laughed and played while he worked tirelessly to collect enough food for winter. Barnaby would shake his head slowly when Rocky walked past without offering to help. Even little Wren, who was always kind and gentle, began to feel a growing frustration in her tiny heart. "He'll be sorry when winter comes," Wren whispered to Bramble one evening, as they watched Rocky dance around a bonfire while the others worked. Bramble sighed again. "Yes," she said softly, "I'm afraid he will." But Rocky didn't notice. Rocky never noticed. He was too busy having fun. Summer in Willowbrook Forest was beautiful. The days were long and warm, and the sun painted everything in shades of gold and green. The meadows were full of wildflowers, daisies and buttercups and bluebells, and the air was thick with their sweet perfume. The rivers ran clear and cool, and the berries hung heavy on the bushes, red and purple and blue. It was a time of plenty, a time of abundance. And Rocky loved summer more than any other season, because summer was a time when there was very little work to do. The food was easy to find, the weather was warm, and there was no urgency, no pressure, no reason to think about the future. Rocky would wake up each morning when the sun was high in the sky, because he never set an alarm or made any plans. He would stretch and yawn and scratch behind his ears, and then he would wander out of his hollow tree to see what the day had to offer. Sometimes he would go to the river and splash around in the cool water. Sometimes he would climb a tree and hang from a branch by his tail, just for the fun of it. Sometimes he would visit the other animals and tell them jokes or stories, making them laugh while they worked. And always, always, Rocky found ways to avoid any real work. One morning, Bramble was harvesting carrots from her garden. The carrots were ripe and orange and beautiful, and there were many of them to pull. It was hard work, kneeling in the soil, tugging at the green tops, pulling up the heavy roots. Rocky wandered by and watched for a moment. "Those look like fine carrots, Bramble," he said with his charming smile. "Thank you, Rocky," Bramble said, wiping her brow. "Would you like to help me harvest them? There are so many I could use an extra pair of paws." Rocky tilted his head and considered the request. Then he smiled again, wider this time. "You know, I'd love to help," he said, "but I just remembered. I promised to check on the river. The water level might be changing, and someone should keep an eye on it. Very important work, you know." Bramble sighed softly. "Of course, Rocky. Maybe another time." "Definitely," Rocky called over his shoulder as he walked away. "Another time for sure." And he was gone, off to play in the river, while Bramble continued her work alone. Later that same day, Sooty was carrying acorns up to his nest. He had found a wonderful oak tree full of fat, ripe acorns, and he was gathering as many as he could. Back and forth he went, his little legs working hard, his fluffy tail bouncing with each step. Rocky found him and sat down on a nearby rock to watch. "You're working hard, Sooty," Rocky observed. "Someone has to," Sooty panted, not stopping his work. "Winter will be here before we know it." "Ah, yes, winter," Rocky said thoughtfully. "But that's months away. Why not enjoy the summer while it lasts?" "Some of us like to be prepared," Sooty said, a little more sharply than he intended. Rocky laughed. "Suit yourself. I'll let you get back to it. I'm going to go find some berries. The blackberry bushes on the south side of the meadow are ripe, and I want to eat as many as I can before they're gone." "Before they're gone?" Sooty asked. "Aren't you going to save some for winter?" Rocky laughed again, louder this time. "Winter? Who wants to think about winter in the middle of summer? I'll worry about that when the time comes." And Rocky bounded off toward the meadow, while Sooty shook his head and continued his work. This was how Rocky spent his days. Always avoiding, always postponing, always finding excuses. "I'll do it later. Tomorrow is soon enough. The forest will provide." These were Rocky's favorite phrases, and he said them so often that they became almost like a song. A lazy song, sung by a lazy raccoon who believed that his cleverness would always save him. But seasons, as all creatures know, do not wait for anyone. Summer passed slowly, as summers do when they are warm and pleasant. The days were long and golden, and there was no hurry in the air. The animals worked steadily, calmly, knowing that they had time. But then, almost without anyone noticing, things began to change. The first sign was the leaves. The great maple trees that grew along the edge of the forest began to show hints of color at their tips. Just a touch of yellow at first, or a blush of orange, as if the trees were blushing at the thought of the cold that was coming. Then the mornings grew cooler. The dew on the grass was thicker, and it took longer for the sun to warm the air. The birds began to gather in flocks, preparing for their long journey south. The insects grew quieter, their songs softer and more occasional, and the animals of the forest began to work faster. Bramble increased her harvest, pulling carrots and turnips and cabbages from her garden from sunrise to sunset. Her little paws were sore, and her back ached, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Winter was coming. Sooty doubled his efforts, running back and forth across the forest floor, his fluffy tail streaming behind him. He was filling his storage rooms as fast as he could, but every day he worried that it wasn't enough. Every night, lying in his nest, he counted his nuts and wondered if he had enough to last until spring. Barnaby sealed the cracks in his cave and gathered the last of the wild honey. He worked slowly and steadily, as was his way, but there was a new urgency in his movements. The wind had changed. He could feel it in his bones. Winter wasn't far away. Little wrens spun and wove and gathered seeds and grains, working by candlelight long after the other animals had gone to sleep. She was small, and she needed less food than the others, but she also knew that a small body could grow cold faster than a large one. All the animals worked harder than ever. All except Rocky. Rocky watched the changing leaves with pleasure. "How beautiful," he said. "The forest is putting on a show." He felt the cooler mornings and smiled. "Ah, autumn, my favorite season. Not too hot, not too cold, just perfect." He saw the birds gathering and heard their distant calls. "Safe travels," he called to them, waving a paw. "See you in the spring." Rocky simply didn't understand. Or perhaps he understood, but refused to believe it. Winter was coming, and he was not prepared. He had no food stored. His hollow tree was not insulated against the cold. He had no firewood, no warm blankets, no preserved fruits or vegetables. Nothing. But Rocky kept telling himself that it would be fine. He was clever after all. He would figure something out when the time came. He always did. The other animals were less certain. One cool October evening, Bramble gathered the animals together for a meeting. They sat in a circle around the remains of a warm fire, and Bramble spoke softly but firmly. "Friends," she said, "winter is almost here. We must all make sure we are prepared. We must check our homes, our food stores, our firewood. We must help each other if someone is in need. and we must look out for each other." Everyone nodded. Sooty added, "We should check on Rocky. He hasn't prepared anything." A murmur went through the group. They all knew Rocky was lazy, but this was serious. If he went into winter without any preparation, he could be in real danger. "I'll talk to him," said Barnaby in his deep, gentle voice. "I'll make sure he understands." And so, the next morning, Barnaby visited Rocky's hollow tree. He found the raccoon sleeping peacefully, wrapped in a pile of old leaves, a contented smile on his face. "Rocky," Barnaby said gently. "Rocky, wake up." Rocky opened one eye. "Oh, hello, Barnaby. What time is it?" "It's mid-morning," Barnaby said. "Rocky, I need to talk to you about winter." Rocky sat up and yawned. "Winter again. You animals worry too much. Winter comes every year, and every year we get through it. Why is this year any different?" "Because you haven't prepared," Barnaby said plainly. "Rocky, you have no food stored. Your home is not ready for the cold. You have no firewood, no warm supplies. What will you do when the snow comes?" Rocky waved a paw dismissively. "I'll figure something out. I always do. Remember last year when I needed food and found that forgotten apple tree? Or the year before when I needed a warm coat and found that abandoned bird's nest to sleep in? I'm clever, Barnaby. I always find a way." Barnaby sighed. "Those were lucky breaks, Rocky. You can't depend on luck forever. One of these days, your luck will run out. And then what?" Rocky's smile didn't waver. "My luck never runs out. I'm Rocky the raccoon, cleverest animal in the forest. Winter doesn't scare me." Barnaby shook his head slowly. He could see that Rocky wasn't listening. He could see that Rocky was living in his own little world, a world where cleverness was enough and preparation was unnecessary. "There's still time," Barnaby said. "If you start now, you can still gather enough food and prepare your home. Will you let us help you?" Rocky laughed. "Help me? I don't need help." "But thank you, Barnaby. You're a good friend. Now, if you'll excuse me, I heard there are some late-season berries by the old stone wall, and I want to see if I can find them." And Rocky scampered off, leaving Barnaby alone in the hollow tree, shaking his head. "He'll learn," Barnaby murmured to himself. "I just hope it won't be too hard a lesson." The days grew shorter and shorter. The sun rose late and set early, and the hours of daylight grew fewer and fewer. The sky became grey and heavy, filled with clouds that promised snow. The wind grew colder and stronger, howling through the branches of the trees like a living thing. And then, one cold November evening, the first snowflake fell. It was a small, delicate thing, spinning through the air like a tiny dancer. It landed on a leaf and sat there for a moment, sparkling in the last light of the setting sun. And then another snowflake fell, and another and another. By morning, the world had changed. The forest was covered in a blanket of white. The trees wore coats of snow on their branches. The ground was hidden beneath a soft, thick layer that sparkled in the pale winter sunlight. The rivers were edged with ice, and the air was so cold that it hurt to breathe. The animals of Willowbrook Forest retreated to their warm, prepared homes. Bramble was safe in her burrow, surrounded by her carefully stored food. She had a warm fire going, and the smell of vegetable soup filled the air. She was comfortable and content, knowing that she had everything she needed to last until spring. Sooty was in his nest, high up in the pine tree, surrounded by his carefully hoarded nuts. He had soft blankets made of moss and feathers, and his little storage rooms were full. He was cozy and warm, watching the snow fall through his window. Barnaby was in his cave, which was lined with soft moss and dried leaves. He had his honey and his dried berries, and a fire burned cheerfully at the cave entrance, keeping the cold at bay. He was large and warm and well prepared. Little Wren was tucked into her pumpkin house, wrapped in her hand-woven blankets, with her tiny stores of seeds and grains within easy reach. She was small, but she was warm and safe. All the animals were ready, all except Rocky. Rocky woke that first morning of winter to a strange coldness. His hollow tree, which had been comfortable enough in autumn, was now freezing. The wind found every crack and crevice, blowing icy air across his sleeping spot. Rocky shivered and pulled his tail over himself like a blanket, but it wasn't enough. His tail was thin and cold, not warm like a proper blanket. "What's going on?" Rocky muttered, his teeth chattering. "Why is it so cold?" Then he remembered. Winter. Rocky's heart sank. He sat up and looked around his hollow tree. There was nothing there. No food, no firewood, no blankets, nothing to keep him warm, nothing to eat. He had spent all of summer playing and resting and avoiding work. And now winter was here, and he was completely unprepared. "It's okay," Rocky told himself, trying to stay calm. "I'm clever. I'll figure something out. I always do." He stumbled out of his hollow tree into the snow. The cold hit him like a wall. The wind cut through his thin fur, and the snow was deep and wet, soaking his paws immediately. Rocky looked around. The forest was beautiful in its winter coat, but it was also harsh and unforgiving. There were no berries to pick, no insects to catch, no easy meals lying around. Everything was buried under snow. Rocky tried foraging, but found nothing. He tried digging in the snow, hoping to find buried nuts or roots, but came up empty-pawed. He tried catching fish in the river, but the water was half frozen, and his paws were too cold to feel anything. By evening, Rocky was hungry and shivering. He returned to his hollow tree and tried to make a fire. but he had no dry wood and no kindling. Everything was wet from the snow. Rocky curled up in a corner of his hollow tree, his tail wrapped around him, and tried to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. The cold was too biting. The hunger was too sharp. And for the first time in his life, Rocky felt something he had never felt before. Fear. The days passed, and the snow grew deeper. Rocky ventured out each morning, searching for food, searching for shelter, searching for anything that could help him survive. But each day he found less and less. The forest, which had been so generous in summer and autumn, was now closed and cold and unyielding. Rocky grew thinner. His once glossy fur became dull and matted. His bright amber eyes lost their sparkle. His clever, charming smile disappeared, replaced by a permanent expression of worry and discomfort. The cold was relentless. It seeped into every corner of his hollow tree, into every bone of his small body. Rocky shivered constantly, his teeth chattering so much that he could barely speak. The hunger was constant too. His stomach growled day and night, reminding him of his foolishness. He had not eaten a proper meal in days. He was weak and tired and miserable and lonely. The other animals were safe in their warm homes. Rocky could see the glow of their fires through their windows. He could smell the delicious smells of their cooking. Bramble's vegetable soup, Sooty's roasted nuts, Barnaby's honey cakes. The smells made his stomach growl even louder, and his heart ache with longing. Rocky thought about going to ask for help. Many times he started walking toward one of his neighbors' homes, but each time he stopped. What would he say? What would they think? They had all warned him. They had all told him to prepare. They had all offered to help, and he had ignored them all. His pride kept him from asking for help. His shame kept him from knocking on their doors. So he stayed in his cold, empty, hollow tree, alone with his hunger and his regret. But eventually, desperation overcame pride. It was the third week of winter. The snow was deeper than Rocky had ever seen it. The temperature had dropped so low that even the rivers had frozen solid in places. The wind never stopped blowing, and the sky was a constant, oppressive grey. Rocky hadn't eaten in 2 days. He was so weak that he could barely walk. His shivering had become constant, a violent trembling that shook his whole body. He knew that if he didn't get help soon, he might not survive. And so, with the last of his strength, Rocky ventured out into the snow. He stumbled through the drifts, his legs weak and unsteady. The wind whipped at his fur, and the snow blinded him, but he kept going. He went to Bramble's burrow first. The little burrow was warm and inviting, with light glowing from the tiny windows. Rocky could smell something delicious cooking inside. He stood at the entrance, shivering and trembling, and knocked weakly on the door. There was a moment of silence. Then the door opened and Bramble appeared. Her eyes widened when she saw Rocky. He was a pitiful sight. Thin, dirty, shivering, with snow caked in his fur, and his eyes dull with hunger and cold. "Rocky!" Bramble gasped. "Oh my goodness! Come in quickly!" She helped him inside where it was warm. She wrapped him in a soft blanket and sat him by the fire. She made him a bowl of hot vegetable soup, and Rocky drank it down so quickly that he burned his tongue. "Thank you," Rocky whispered, his voice trembling. "Thank you, Bramble." Bramble sat down beside him and looked at him with kind but serious eyes. "Rocky," she said gently, "why didn't you prepare for winter?" Rocky lowered his head. I thought I had time. I thought I'd figure something out when the time came. I thought I was too clever to need to prepare." Bramble sighed. "We all tried to warn you, Rocky. We all offered to help. Why didn't you listen?" Rocky's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was lazy," he whispered. "Because I thought I was smarter than everyone else. Because I thought hard work was beneath me. I was wrong. I was so wrong." Bramble put a gentle paw on his shoulder. "You're not the first to learn this lesson, Rocky, and you won't be the last. But winter is long, and you can't stay here forever. We need to figure out a plan for you." That evening, Bramble invited the other animals to her burrow for a meeting. Rocky sat in the corner, wrapped in his blanket, too ashamed to meet anyone's eyes. The animals listened as Bramble explained the situation. Then they looked at Rocky, and Rocky looked at the floor. "I know I don't deserve your help," Rocky said quietly. "I was lazy while you all worked. I laughed at your hard work. I made fun of your preparations. And now I'm in this mess because of my own foolishness. If you don't want to help me, I understand." There was a long silence. Then Sooty spoke. "We're not going to let you starve, Rocky. That's not who we are. But," Sooty continued, "we do need to teach you something. You need to learn that laziness has consequences. You need to learn that hard work matters. And you need to learn that being clever isn't enough. You have to be willing to put in the effort." Rocky nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. "I'll do whatever it takes." Barnaby stood up, his large frame filling the room. "Then here's what we'll do," he said. "We'll help you survive this winter. But when spring comes, you're going to learn how to work. We'll teach you how to gather food, how to build a proper home, how to prepare for the future. And you're going to do the work yourself. No shortcuts, no excuses." Rocky looked up, his eyes red with tears. "I promise," he whispered. "I promise I'll change." The animals took turns helping Rocky through the winter. Each day, one of them would visit him and bring him food. Bramble brought him warm soup and bread. Sooty brought him nuts and dried fruits. Barnaby brought him honey and berries. Wren brought him seeds and grains. Even Hazel, who was usually so quiet, brought him dried grasses for his bed. They helped him insulate his hollow tree, packing the cracks with moss and dried leaves. They brought him firewood and taught him how to make a fire. They gave him warm blankets and soft bedding. And slowly, Rocky began to recover. His strength returned. His fur regained its shine. His eyes brightened again. But something else changed too. Rocky's attitude changed. Every time an animal brought him food, Rocky said thank you with genuine gratitude. Every time someone helped him, Rocky felt a deep appreciation that he had never felt before. He began to understand, truly understand, how much work it took to survive the winter. He began to understand how much effort the other animals had put into their preparations. He began to understand that their hard work wasn't just boring or tedious. It was essential. It was what kept them safe and warm and fed. Rocky was ashamed of his laziness. But more than that, he was determined to change. One cold night, as Rocky sat by his fire, thinking about everything that had happened, he made a decision. When spring came, he would work harder than any animal in the forest. He would learn everything the others could teach him. He would never be lazy again. Rocky survived, thanks to the kindness and generosity of his friends. And as he waited for spring, he spent his time thinking and planning and learning. Bramble taught him about gardening. She explained how to plant seeds, how to tend them, how to harvest them at the right time. She told him about the different vegetables and fruits that grew in the forest, and which ones were best for storing. Sooty taught him about gathering. He showed Rocky how to find the best nuts and seeds, how to store them properly, how to keep them dry and safe from pests. He taught Rocky the importance of being thorough and organized. Barnaby taught him about building. He showed Rocky how to insulate a home against the cold, how to build a proper fireplace, how to make sure everything was secure and warm. Little Wren taught him about weaving. She showed Rocky how to spin thread from plant fibers, how to weave simple blankets and mats, how to make things with his own paws. Rocky listened carefully to all of them. He asked questions. He took notes in his memory. He practiced what he could, even in the limited space of his hollow tree. By the time spring arrived, Rocky was ready. Spring came to Willowbrook Forest slowly and gently. The snow melted, revealing the green grass beneath. The rivers swelled with meltwater, rushing and sparkling in the growing sunlight. The birds returned from the south, singing their joyful songs. The flowers bloomed, painting the meadows in every color imaginable. And Rocky emerged from his hollow tree with a new determination in his eyes. He went straight to Bramble's garden and asked if he could help. Bramble was surprised but pleased. Together they prepared the soil and planted seeds. Rocky worked hard, his paws dirty, his back aching, but he didn't complain. He worked from sunrise to sunset, just like Bramble. The next day, Rocky went to Sooty and asked to help gather nuts. Together they ran through the forest, collecting acorns and hazelnuts and walnuts. Rocky was clumsy at first. He had never done this before. But Sooty was patient and Rocky improved quickly. The day after that, Rocky went to Barnaby and asked to help build. They worked together on a new storage shed for Barnaby's honey, and Rocky learned how to measure, how to cut, how to fit pieces together. It was hard work, but Rocky found that he liked it. There was something satisfying about creating something with his own paws. Day after day, Rocky worked. He helped Bramble in her garden. He helped Sooty gather nuts. He helped Barnaby build. He helped Wren weave. He helped everyone who would let him. And he discovered something surprising. He discovered that hard work felt good. Not physically, of course. His paws were sore, his muscles ached, and he was tired at the end of each day. But emotionally, mentally, spiritually, Rocky felt a satisfaction that he had never felt before. When he looked at a garden he had helped plant, he felt proud. When he saw a pile of nuts he had gathered, he felt accomplished. When he saw a shed he had helped build, he felt a sense of achievement. This was a completely new feeling for Rocky. He had spent his whole life avoiding work, thinking that leisure and fun were the keys to happiness. But now he realized that there was a different kind of happiness. A deeper, more meaningful happiness that came from hard work and accomplishment. Rocky worked so hard that the other animals were amazed. They had never seen him like this. The lazy, carefree raccoon who had once laughed at their work ethic was now one of the hardest workers in the forest. "You've changed, Rocky," Bramble said one evening, as they sat together watching the sunset. "I have," Rocky agreed, "and I'm glad. I was wrong before. I thought being clever was enough. I thought I could get by without working. But I was wrong. Being clever is important, but it's not everything. You also need to be willing to put in the effort. You need to be willing to do the hard things, even when they're not fun." Bramble smiled. "I'm proud of you, Rocky." "I'm proud of me too," Rocky said, and he meant it. As the months passed, Rocky's transformation became complete. He built himself a new home. Not just a hollow tree, but a proper house, made of sturdy branches and insulated with soft moss. He installed windows that let in the light, and a fireplace that kept him warm. He even hung a little lantern outside his front door, so that travelers could find their way in the dark. He planted a garden of his own, full of vegetables and herbs and berries. He tended it carefully, watering and weeding and harvesting. By the end of summer, he had more food than he could eat. and he shared the excess with the other animals. He gathered nuts and stored them in special rooms he had carved into his new house. He wove blankets and mats for his home. He prepared for winter with the same diligence and dedication as the other animals. Rocky became a valued member of the community. He helped others when they needed it. He shared what he had. He worked alongside his friends, and he found joy in the work. And the other animals respected him for it. They had seen his journey from laziness to responsibility. They had seen his growth, and they were happy to have him as a true friend and neighbor. One warm autumn day, as the leaves were beginning to turn, a stranger arrived in Willowbrook Forest. He was a fox, a young, handsome fox with bright orange fur and a clever smile. His name was Jasper, and he was new to the forest. Jasper settled into a little den near the edge of the meadow, and at first he seemed like a nice enough fellow. But Rocky noticed something familiar about him. Jasper didn't work. While the other animals prepared for winter, Jasper lounged in the sun. While they gathered food, Jasper played in the leaves. While they built and repaired their homes, Jasper took naps. Rocky recognized the behavior because it was exactly what he used to do. One afternoon, Rocky found Jasper lying under a tree, doing nothing. "Hello there," Rocky said, sitting down nearby. "I'm Rocky. I live in the village." Jasper looked up lazily. "Hey, I'm Jasper. Nice to meet you." Rocky studied the young fox for a moment. "You're not preparing for winter, are you?" Jasper shrugged. "Why bother? Winter's months away. I'll deal with it when it comes." Rocky smiled, a knowing, gentle smile. "I used to say the exact same thing." Jasper raised an eyebrow. "Really?" Rocky nodded. "I was the laziest animal in this forest. While everyone else worked, I rested. While they prepared, I played. I thought I was clever enough to get by without working. I thought hard work was for fools." "What happened?" Jasper asked, suddenly curious. Rocky looked up at the sky, where the first signs of autumn were showing in the clouds. "Winter happened," he said. "Winter came, and I wasn't prepared. I had no food, no shelter, no warmth. I nearly froze. I nearly starved. It was the worst experience of my life." Jasper was quiet for a moment. "So what changed?" Rocky looked back at the young fox. "I learned," he said simply. "I learned that being clever isn't enough. I learned that hard work matters. I learned that when you keep delaying today's work, one day trouble comes knocking at your door. And when it does, you'd better be ready." Jasper thought about this for a long moment. Then he sat up. "You really think winter will be that bad?" "I know it will," Rocky said. "But you still have time. If you start now, you can prepare. You can gather food, build a proper shelter, get ready, and I'll help you. I'll teach you everything I know." Jasper looked at Rocky, and something in the raccoon's eyes, something honest and true, convinced him. "Okay," Jasper said slowly. "Okay, show me what to do." And Rocky did. He taught Jasper how to gather food and store it properly. He taught him how to build a shelter that would keep out the cold. He taught him how to prepare for the long winter months. And Jasper, it turned out, was a good student. He worked hard, and he learned quickly. By the time winter arrived, he was ready. He had food stored, a warm shelter, and everything he needed to survive the cold. Jasper never forgot the lesson Rocky taught him, and he passed it on to others, just as Rocky had passed it on to him. Years passed in Willowbrook Forest, and Rocky grew older and wiser. He became known as one of the most respected animals in the forest, not because he was the cleverest, though he was still very clever, but because he had learned the value of hard work. He had learned that true wisdom wasn't just about being smart. It was about being willing to put in the effort. Rocky taught the young animals who came after him. He taught them about the rhythm of the seasons, about the importance of preparation, about the satisfaction that comes from a job well done. And he always told them his story of laziness and failure, of learning and growth, of redemption and change. "Remember," he would say, "the forest is generous, but it demands respect. Prepare for the future, and the future will be kind to you. Neglect your responsibilities, and they will come back to haunt you." The animals listened and they learned, and the forest flourished. And every winter, when the snow fell and the wind blew cold, every animal in Willowbrook Forest was safe and warm and fed, because they had worked for it, because they had earned it, because they understood the wisdom of preparation. Now, as this story comes to an end, let me tell you one last thing about Willowbrook Forest. The forest is still there, in that land far, far away. The trees still grow tall, and the rivers still flow gently over their smooth stones. The animals still live together, working and playing and helping each other. And if you listen very carefully on a quiet night, when the stars are bright and the moon is full, you might hear something. You might hear the soft whisper of the wind through the leaves. You might hear the gentle babble of the river over its stones. You might hear the distant hoot of an owl, or the soft chirp of crickets. And if you listen even more carefully, you might hear something else. You might hear the faint sound of laughter, the laughter of happy, contented animals who have worked hard and prepared well, who are safe in their warm homes, who have everything they need. And somewhere in the middle of it all, you might hear one voice above the others. A warm, friendly voice, telling stories to young animals, teaching them the wisdom of the forest. That voice belongs to Rocky. Rocky the raccoon, the laziest animal in Willowbrook Forest. who became one of the hardest working. The animal who learned too late the value of preparation and spent the rest of his life making sure no one else made the same mistake. The animal who discovered that hard work isn't a burden, but a gift. And as you drift off to sleep, dreaming of this quiet forest and its gentle creatures, remember this: tomorrow is a new day. A day to work, a day to prepare, a day to grow. And when you do the things that need to be done, when you put in the effort, when you face your responsibilities with courage and determination, you earn something that no amount of laziness can ever give you. You earn peace of mind. You earn the right to rest. You earn the warmth of a job well done. So sleep now, dear listener. Sleep peacefully, knowing that tomorrow you will rise, and you will work, and you will build, and you will grow. And when winter comes, and it always comes, you will be ready. Good night, sweet dreams.